So this is my first time in this capacity talking about health and wellness. So I'm truly grateful for the opportunity. All right, so here we go. First thing, we're gonna warm. You understand? You have to warm. The microphone is on me. I can't move too much. All right, so never you do nothing without warming up the muscles. And after you warm, you're gonna have to stretch. All right, you're gonna have to stretch. Stretch your hamstrings. Yes. Then just a little on the front.
Just a little,
not too far. Especially your All right, a little twist in the waistline, warm up the back. Very, very important to warm because that prevents injuries.
You know, I'm going to host a sports day or so. Me warm.
Little in the side, we do. Yeah.
Oh, those beautiful stretch.
That feels nice.
Yes.
No stretching is designed for you to feel good enough and vibe you up to get into the exercise.
Good evening. Tonight we begin with the numbers that will shape the country's economic direction for the year ahead. Tomorrow, the government of Jamaica opens a 2026 budget debate in Parliament. But even before the first speech is delivered, the country's Independent Fiscal Commission has issued a caution, suggesting that some of the economic assumptions behind the government's projection may be too optimistic. What does that mean for the credibility of the budget? And what does it mean for Jamaicans who will ultimately live with the consequences of those numbers? Tonight we break down the fiscal reality and what the Independent Fiscal Commission is warning about. Then, later in the program, 277 Cuban medical professionals are leaving Jamaica. The government has issued 2 new statements since Thursday's announcement. Cuba has called it capitulation to Washington. The opposition has questions, and so do the patients in rural parishes and public hospitals who depended on those doctors. And we close with a moment of recognition for journalism here in Jamaica after the Press Association of Jamaica Awards over the weekend and International Women's Day yesterday. I'm Jodie Ann Quarry, and this is Lead Story. It's that time of year again Tomorrow morning, Finance Minister Favour Williams will open the budget debate at Gordon House. It starts at 2 o'clock, but she's presenting a spending plan for the 2026 to 2027 financial year. That includes Jamaica's first new tax package in nearly a decade. Nearly $30 billion in new revenue measures. The minister has said it took a Category 5 hurricane for that to happen. But the budget is expected to approach 1.4 trillion Jamaican dollars. That was before bombs dropped in Iran and oil prices started flying. But even before the debate begins, the country's Independent Fiscal Commission has raised a red flag. The Independent Fiscal Commission, the body established by law to provide an independent assessment of the government's fiscal projections, has raised serious questions about the foundations of this budget. The Commission says the government's projected nominal GDP growth of about 9.2% may be overly optimistic given current inflation conditions. Now, why does all of that matter? Well, because if economic growth is overstated, then tax revenue projections may also be overstated. And that's not good news for anybody. There's also the wage bill. The public sector wage bill has grown from 8.8% of gross domestic product, or GDP, in the 2020 to 2021 financial year to an estimated 13.8% this year, consuming 56 cents of every dollar collected in taxes. 4 years ago, that figure was lower, 36 cents in every dollar. Now, I say all of that because when I start getting into the conversation, you need to know the background. Jamaica's public debt currently stands at about 68% of GDP. The law requires that number to fall to 60% by the end of the decade. So the question now is whether the country's fiscal projections are grounded in today's, and not last week's, economic reality. To help us break this all down, we're joined by economist Keenan Faulkner. Keenan, thank you so very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jody.
Keenan, it's important to be here with us, be gentle with us. Before we go deep into the numbers, when ordinary Jamaicans hear a debate about GDP assumptions and fiscal projections, all of this fancy stuff, what should they be really paying attention to in this discussion and the discussions to come about the budget?
All right, so first, I think it's probably a good thing to define what we mean by credibility of the budget. And so, as you know, the Independent Fiscal Commission assesses both credibility and sustainability. Now, credibility just means that the initial forecasts, projections, and the assumptions on the budget, the likelihood of that now being met. Sustainability means the overall fiscal policy and strategy and the likelihood of that maintaining debt. So the Fiscal Commissioner said that broadly sustainable, that's the budget now, because it goes up to 68%, and debt now will be coming back down to 60% by the end of the decade. Credibility, now, there are certain things that underlie the budget. You project growth, you project inflation, and oil prices. Oil prices are a key input in the budget. Now, what the Commission has said is that growth is overstated now because inflation running at about 5 to 6%, but the budget was planning for inflation of 9%.
9 to 10%.
Yes, and what that would have meant is that revenues are inflated, growth would have been higher, and so you get more tax revenues.
So before we get deep into it, somebody at home listening right now, trying to figure out how to follow along this conversation, why even this conversation matters. When they hear the budget tomorrow, what they're looking for, put it in context for them. When they are paying attention to these conversations that can become quite technical, what is it that they should be trying to tease out about how it affects them and why it matters?
So if we project that we get X dollars, right, then what the assumptions underlying the budget would mean is that you are now going to get more than that, but you should really be getting less because inflation is not going to be as high as projected. When inflation is above target, and Jamaica targets inflation at 4 to 6%, so we mean to say that prices will rise by this amount over the course of the year. But if it goes above that, then revenues will start to overperform and you get more than is expected. But if that is not credible, then it means you have planned for getting more revenues that you will not get. So I plan to get $100, and then you make all sorts of plans with those $100. and then you realize that you can't do what you plan to do because you really, in reality, are supposed to get $80 or $70.
You are therefore helping us better understand why getting it right matters tomorrow, figuring it all out. And you've called this one of the most consequential budgets in modern history. Given the Middle East conflict started days before the tabling, has our underlying assumption, especially one of those key things you spoke about, oil, and oil at $74 per barrel, has that already become a dangerous fiscal fiction? Is that a fairy tale that 2 months ago sounded fine, but 2 weeks or 2 months from now might not be credible, given that yesterday we saw oil now move past $100 per barrel?
I'll put it this way. When the budget was being put together, we planned for an oil price of $60 per barrel. And now it has doubled at one point before falling back down to less than 100, still elevated, but still way more than what was planned. So that has implications for all parameters. We talk about now what is spent on imports. A third of the import bill is in oil. We talk about now how much foreign exchange that will use. And then if that uses up more foreign exchange than you plan for, then you have less foreign exchange, for example, to pay down on debt or to do other things that you pay USD in. Now, all of that is reflected in the budget. You now talk about the fact that taxes on fuel can help to mitigate it. So you get more revenue because of higher oil prices. But if inflation and general inflation goes up as a result of the increase in oil prices, and normally that tends to happen because it doesn't just affect the price of oil, but rather the price of food, the price of other things that go into the inputs in the manufacturing process. Then if inflation becomes much higher, then that also has implications for the government needing to find more money on the expenditure side, because then those figures are also inflated. So overall, oil prices, we import a significant amount of our inflation from the price of oil, as well as the price of food. So we are talking about oil prices, but we haven't begun to consider that when the Strait of Hormuz is closed, that also means that ships carrying agricultural fertilizers and chemicals and other inputs, those also cannot pass through, and then higher insurance costs just filter through the entire supply chain. So as a result, prices in general go up. We import it, inflation is higher. That means that the government has to find more money to spend, but it could also be offset partially by the fact that you get more revenue from gas taxes and other things that are linked to oil.
I think that's so important, especially given that you've made reference to the Strait of Hormuz, that strait between Iran, the United Arab Emirates, and Oman is now controlling 20% of the world's oil. President Donald Trump yesterday said to oil tankers, be brave, just run the blockade. But Iran has made it very clear that they will bomb warships or bomb ships that are attempting to go through this strait as part of their reactionary measures to now the Israeli-US bombing of Iran, and Iran having retaliatory strikes across the region. We are going to be impacted by the price of oil. We've already seen increases at the pumps here in Jamaica. Last week, people are watching this and how it will directly impact them. But if we don't get enough money, are we looking at like an emergency war tax on fuel? People, like getting people to stop driving as much, getting people to work from home, putting things in place. Pakistan has already today indicated that government workers will only be working 4 days a week. Schools now are closed for 2 weeks already. Is this something that we might be looking at, maybe not announced tomorrow, but practically looking at as a way to keep our reserves since we import so much oil?
Well, I don't think that it will be that extreme, because you look at the fact that NIR has been the highest it is in its history. It's over $6 billion US. That provides coverage for almost a year of import.
Hold on, Keenan Faulkner. I have to take a quick break here as you continue to explain to us the importance of this oil and the minister's budget tomorrow. She opens the budget debate, and every single person will be looking at a new tax package and what oil means to the country. We'll talk about that next here inside Lead Story.
I'm Landy. Welcome to NLA Connect, the National Land Agency's customer engagement platform. NLA Connect is a simple, user-friendly platform designed to help you share your feedback, get support, and updates about land-related matters. Available 24/7, NLA Connect allows you to share suggestions, comments, and commendations, submit queries and report issues, attach files with your requests, track requests and get real-time status updates, connect with NLA client engagement officers, and provide feedback on the service received by the platform. We're making it easier for you to connect with us. You can access NLA Connect via our website, using the kiosk at any of our offices or scanning the QR code displayed at our locations. Need any help along the way? Check out our FAQs section. It has all the answers you need in one location. NLA Connect, your voice, our priority.
Jamaica's unemployment rate has fallen to 3.3%, down from 13.2% in 2016. Our government's continued focus on job creation is delivering real results. We are building Jamaica. The time by the Office of the Prime Minister is...
The internationally acclaimed On Stage with Winfred Williams.
At a new time, Saturdays at 8 p.m. on CVM TV.
So much more than entertainment.
Welcome back to Lead Story. I'm Jodie-Ann Quarry. Economist Keenan Faulkner rejoins me now inside studios as we talk about the budget debate starting tomorrow at 2, and then a series of discussions that will go on with the opposition spokesman on finance, Julian Robinson, coming on later this week, the opposition leader next week, and the Prime Minister closing out the series of discussions that are going back and forth as we look at what Jamaica's budget is. Keenan, let's go further, because between April and December of last year, the government spent $18.5 billion, 32% less on capital projects than it had budgeted. This is something that the oil prices that you're talking to us about now, and the importance of that, the price of these materials is going to matter. When we're looking at gas stations, when we're looking at people making decisions now at $100 per barrel and putting some sort of war tax on, some sort of restraint, telling people stay inside, you're saying it won't be that serious here, given our situation. Why?
Yeah, I don't think that that is something that will be government mandated. I think if people reduce their own demand or consumption for gas, that might have to come, if you're persuaded to do so, or if you feel like you need to do it. But we have a better ability to absorb this kind of shock than at any point in our history previously.
Oh, why?
So because NIR has never been higher. So
net international reserves?
Yes. So,
what's that?
So net international reserves are the difference between your net foreign assets and your liabilities. So basically, the Bank of Jamaica, its savings, its proceeds from foreign exchange transactions, its remittances, tourism, whatever is remitted to the bank as a percentage of that stays with the bank.
Can we then think of it as Jamaica having a savings account, then healthy savings set aside for such a rainy day as this?
Effectively, yes. It's precisely for this kind of upheaval and conflict that is going on. So just for context, in the 1970s, when the oil price shocks of the 70s and the price of oil doubled or tripled overnight, our NIR was negative. So we had no money to absorb that shock. We had negative dollars in the Bank of Jamaica for, I think it was 14 consecutive years, up until the mid-1990s. But now we have so much healthy reserves over time that has been built up, which has also been used to stabilize the currency. So in the event that we have this sort of shock, we're able to absorb the effect on the import bill. So the import bill, as I mentioned, was a third. It might go up, more than that, cost you hundreds of millions of US dollars more than usual. So we have it. right there.
We have it. How long is that savings account going to buffer us for? Maybe a month, maybe a couple months? When do we need this war to absolutely have an end date for us to say we run out of savings and now we have to deal with some really harsh decisions?
So if we earned no money, right, to pay for our imports for the entire year, we would still be okay.
Ooh.
Because it has coverage for about 50 weeks, thereabout.
15 weeks?
50.
50 weeks,
So it's
all right.
adequate.
So certainly then enough for the year, certainly enough to take care of all of us. We're looking though at a budget for the first time in a decade that has new taxes in it. For many people, they've been liking the No New Taxes song. They've been singing the No New Taxes song. You've previously argued that the government should reduce taxes after a crisis to spur growth. Since they chose the opposite path, and they're now trying to raise $29.4 billion in tax measures. Are we taxing our way into productivity, into growth, or are we taxing our way into potential recession?
Well, I hope not that we are.
I would hope not either, as well.
You know, you don't want economic activity to be depressed at the time when it needs to accelerate. And as you mentioned earlier, we have a chronic underspend or under execution of capital expenditure every year. It's been that way for the last 4 years. And now, with the establishment of NARA, the National Reconstruction and Resilience Authority, it is intended to overcome some of those problems because the regular government bureaucracy cannot deliver at the sort of speed and scale that is required in this emergency situation. So, but you want growth to now accelerate. And the peak of growth is going to be around 3% next year before it falls back to 1 to 2%, which is its normal range that it has been for the last 40 to 50 years. For context, during COVID, when taxes had been removed, so many persons don't remember that GCT was actually lowered from 16.5% to 15%.
Yes.
And the economy, it helped to boost spending. So the quarter after the initial fall during COVID, when the economy was booting itself, we had growth of up to 14% in a quarter. And then, we had double digits before it started to lower itself and normalize over time. Not saying that that would have happened, no, necessarily, because you have productive assets that were taken out of commission, and those take some time to come back online. As you know, hotels, some of them are not going to open until later this year or early next year.
Yes.
So, but what we need now is that the growth that will come from construction will now get us back to where we are going to go.
But we've been accused of being chronically underspending. That is, that we've had capital expenditure put aside in our budget, not using that money. NARA is brand new, looking for a CEO as we speak. If we have a habit of underspending, the kind of spending that we need to then spur the sort of consumption that we're looking for, are we all of a sudden this year, because of a new body that is still trying to find its way and its footing in between all sorts of other bits of bureaucracy that we have, expecting to just see a construction boom immediately?
That's not going to happen overnight. But to put the severity of the situation into context, delays are dangerous. We're going to run a deficit of around 137 billion for the coming year. After that, it won't get much better. And for the next 3 years, it's going to still be somewhere around 100 billion. So you have to find money to fill those deficits, either by borrowing, maybe additional tax measures, maybe you have to cut some expenditure. But growth is what will get us out of that situation. So you don't want to be overly optimistic. And I think the Fiscal Commission did say that the projections initially are somewhat ambitious, because we are now planning to spend double the amount that we usually would in a single year. So we normally spend somewhere between 50 and 60 billion. We have to return somewhat between 10 and 20 billion back to the consolidated fund. But we're now planning to spend 100 billion. And we're going to spend around 90 billion and 80 billion a year after that and the year after that. So NARA has to get it right.
And NARA has to get it right quickly, given then that, as you said, delay is dangerous, given then the needs that we have. This is, though, a budget that we're talking about. We've been talking about since February when we saw the budget document, then the Independent Fiscal Commission, and a host of concerns around their report being made public, being a huge discussion as well. Let's talk about that. They've sent out their report. The opposition said it should have been tabled. It's actually something that we should have have in front of us. But I've seen the report. It's online.
Yes.
Why does that make a big difference?
Okay, so it's just what's in the legislation. So Section 15, subsection 6 of the Independent Fiscal Commission Act says that it has to be sent to the Parliament. And then the Independent Fiscal Commission can upload it to its website, it can release it to the media, it can do anything it wants. But it can be tabled anytime after that. But if the Parliament delays in doing that, then that's not the Independent Fiscal Commission's fault.
And so they had clarified then earlier today saying, well, we did our part, sent it to them, you take your own sweet time looking at it, that's your business, we are now able to put it online. And
Yes.
for a year long, they're about a year old, so they're still finding their way and figuring out how we all are going to be dealing with them, giving oversight and feedback to now the budget. But for Jamaican earning a median wage, here in Jamaica, trying to make the best, paying more at the pump. They went to the gas station. People, before the gas lines, rather the gas prices rose, they went there getting gas. They're paying more for basic goods, still rebuilding after Hurricane Melissa. What's the honest message in this budget? Is there any relief in it? Any good things? Any cookies? Any niceness that the people of Jamaica could be looking forward to?
Well, it's hard to tell right now, but that's what will come tomorrow. So normally, revenue measures were not announced until the end of the budget. It has taken some of the sting out of the discussion itself, but we hear the plans, the policies, the programs, what the minister will elaborate on tomorrow. And I hope that one of them will be, what sort of protection will you have now for the most vulnerable, given the expected increase in the cost of living now over the next couple of months or so. So I guess we will just have to wait and see, but I think that should be one of the main priorities.
For Jamaicans looking now, Keenan, they're trying to figure out what exactly is going on, trying to figure out how they make it from here. When they listen to the budget tomorrow, if they listen to the budget tomorrow, what are they looking out for?
I think Jamaicans want to know what is the roadmap for getting out of this situation and as resuming some sort of normalcy as it pertains to how we go about everyday life. We have been severely disrupted, but I think Jamaicans want to know what is the roadmap, how are we going to get there and when are we going to get there.
Do you expect that the minister would have had to sit down and redo parts of this budget given now what's happened over the last 2 weeks?
I think some elements of the speech may have changed. In terms of the numbers, I had previously said that some of it may have to be recast depending on the depth and severity of this crisis now in the Middle East. And I still think that will happen. Oil prices are not going to magically go back down to $60 overnight because production and supplies have been cut, and that will take some amount of time to recover before you get back to where you were before. And even if tensions subsided slightly, there will still be some hesitance to go through the Strait of Hormuz, as you mentioned earlier. Whoever goes through is going to be bombed, but insurance costs are going to go up for that reason, and that filters through everywhere else.
So these are the practical then consequences of this war that halfway across the world impact us here as we look at our own budget. Keenan Faulkner, thank you so very much for joining us inside Lead Story, and thanks for your analysis this evening. This is the day before the numbers, so we're watching to see now what the minister says to us tomorrow. Yes. Still ahead though, the government has issued multiple statements since Thursday on the end of the Cuban medical program. Cuba says Jamaica yielded to Washington. The minister says otherwise. And 277 medical professionals are leaving, with 141 positions still unfilled. Dr. Alfred Dawes, opposition spokesperson on health, joins me after the break.
Good?
Yeah.
All right, stand by.
You want me to look this one?
4, 3, 2.
What is meant by bank failure?
A bank fails when it cannot meet its financial obligations to depositors.
So if the bank fails, that means we can't draw the money? That reminds me of the woman where they run the partner and name off the money. Could even get withdraw.
However, in the event of bank failure, your savings are protected by JDIC
and insured up to 1.2 million per depositor, per ownership category, and per institution.
So you mean to tell me if the bank fails, I
might get back up to $1.2 million.
All of the accounts you have in the bank, in the same name, JDIC I go add them up.
So if you have $400,000 in the bank, you are going to get it back.
But the most anybody can get back is 1.2 million per depositor, per ownership category, and per institution.
JDIC, now go on with things, man.
JDIC, protecting deposits
For you and me.
Every dream conquered is another dream gained. I land and I fly again like a jet plane. Headed straight in your direction. 'Cause I'm wiser, one step closer. I'm winning 'cause I work so hard. And the music keeps on playing, and the people never say we are mash up the night. Oh, what a feeling! Don't stop dreaming. Keep on believing in the power of the feeling. Whatever you want, take a chance. Song in your heart, step in your dance. You got a spark, don't put it dark. Shine your lights
Jamaica, make we do the right thing. Make we live good today for a better tomorrow. Talk it out, don't fight it out. The time by the Ministry of National Security is
6:30.
Last week, the government of Jamaica announced that the long-standing medical cooperation program with Cuba would be terminated. Shortly after that announcement, the Cuban government confirmed that it would recall its medical personnel from Jamaica. Since Thursday, though, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade has issued multiple communications on the end of the Cuban medical program, a partnership of 50 years. It began in 1976. Cuba has responded. The minister has denied allegations of U.S. influence. Two further government updates have followed. The question tonight is whether that sequence of communications adds up to a coherent account or whether critical questions remain unanswered. The scale of what is now ending, though, is not abstract. 8.1 million patients treated, the Cuban government said. 74,000 surgeries performed. More than 90,000 lives assessed and saved. And as of the Standing Finance Committee meeting on March 5th, 136 expressions of interest from the diaspora to fill 277 vacant positions. However, we still have gaps. 141 gaps remain. Now, we should be having with us to discuss policy and political implications opposition spokesperson on health and wellness, Dr. Alfred Dawes. He's not yet, though, with us inside the show. And as we await him, let me give you some background on this and why this is considered to be such an important thing for the government of Jamaica and for the government of Cuba at a time like this. Now, remember where Cuba is. Right above Jamaica, it has continued to support our healthcare system. However, we have been watching discussions about what it meant to have Cuban doctors here in Jamaica and the Cuban medical missions all across the world. Now, we have clearly been seeing Act 1 of a drama, which began on Wednesday, March 4, when the Jamaican Ministry of Foreign Affairs quietly communicated, it seems, to the Cuban embassy that the bilateral health cooperation agreement was being terminated. The government's position was that it officially announced the end of the program on Thursday, March 5, stating that the previous arrangement expired on February 2023, and both governments from 2023 until now, 2026, had failed to agree on a new framework. However, on the same day, Elsewhere in the region, Honduras was also ending their own medical cooperation agreement with Cuba. Same day, different countries, same end result, that Cuba was no longer able to provide medical support to those countries. Now, the Jamaican government argued that the existing program violated local labor and tax laws, as well as international conventions, calling the terms untenable terms. Cuban professionals were not in possession of their own passports, and their salaries, excluding overtime, were paid to the Cuban government, not to the workers themselves. However, this is a 50-year program. And part of the concerns that had been raised about this program, not only by by Secretary of State in the United States, Marco Rubio, but others, was that this was a hallmark of the Cuban cooperation program. They were always in a position to take away the passports of the individuals who came to Jamaica and were transported around the world on the basis of the Cuban government providing support to healthcare systems across the world. In 2019, the United Nations, in its forced labor report, said that the Cuban doctors were likely to be a situation of slavery or forced labor, where individuals did not have their own passports, had minders, and were not in a position, therefore, to push back on whether they wanted to continue to work on this program or not. It also highlighted the laws in Cuba, including a deserter law that said that individuals who left Cuba on these medical missions and failed to return would be jailed for up to 8 years, barred from Cuba, and all of their resources back home in Cuba would be taken by the state, including resources that their family and children would have been using. That is, that they would be punishing the individuals left behind because of those who failed to go back home. The Organization of American States in 2009 as well raised concerns about this. And Marco Rubio last year in 2025, in March, when he came to Jamaica, raised concerns about this as well, indicating from his vantage point that the medical missions that Cuba was sending around the world were forced labor. Now, our Prime Minister in that trip said that Jamaica's use of the program was different. We were doing something exceptional, that the forced labor concerns that were raised in other countries would not be applicable here. But we have in this release on Thursday a note that perhaps it wasn't different after all. An indication that what we are seeing now on Thursday is that the same concerns that had been raised for years, concerns about the conditions of work that Cuban doctors and medical personnel were operating under here in Jamaica, were no different than the concerns that had been raised this entire time. Now, Jamaica attempted to cushion the blow by telling the country on Thursday that, well, these Cuban medical professionals, they might not be able to be part of the medical brigade, but maybe they can stay here, working here, side by side the counterparts that they have been working with this entire time. This time last year, we heard that we had 400 of them on the ground. Now, 277 is what the Cuban government said will be brought back home. However, I told you about that law that said that anybody who didn't come home when they were brought back home by the Cuban government would be labeled a deserter. And in our conversation last Friday with the Minister for Health and Wellness, Dr. Christopher Tufton, he indicated that clearly, given Cuba's response on Friday, they were not at all interested in that, with Cuba alleging that it changed the very nature of the bilateral agreement that Cuba and Jamaica enjoyed. Now, Havana rejected Jamaica's individual contract proposal and dropped what some could understand to be a diplomatic bombshell. Up until Thursday, we felt like we could keep these doctors. Well, on Friday, Havana told us no. And this is in the context as well of other things going on. In Ecuador, 48 hours before, every single Cuban ambassador and personnel at the embassy was kicked out of the country. Why? No information was given. But Cuba says Ecuador was pressured by the United States in order to make that decision. Well, this is the context within which we're having that conversation. And so since then, since this back and forth between Cuba and Jamaica, we've had 2 more releases from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade talking to us about what exactly is going on with our healthcare system. At the end of the day, though, many of these doctors were working in rural facilities, helping with eyes or other things that Jamaica did not have specialists for. And so to talk about what it is that we knew, we didn't know, and what it now means that these Cuban doctors cannot stay here, we have opposition spokesman on health, Dr. Alfred Dawes. Dr. Dawes, thank you for joining us inside Lead Story.
Hi, good afternoon and good evening to all the viewers.
The program has been in place for nearly 5 decades, this program of cooperation between Cuba and Jamaica. In your view, was there adequate transition planning before its announced ending last Thursday?
I'm sorry, I was hearing some noise in your background. I didn't get that clearly.
So I say that the program, the cooperation program between Jamaica and Cuba has been in place for nearly 5 decades. In your view, was there adequate transition planning before its announced ending?
No, I don't think so. But I think what they expected was that there would have been enough time from the announcement to the end of the contract for them to put things in place. What I didn't expect was that after they had publicly announced that they were inducing the collaborators to stay, to leave the program, defect from the program and stay in Jamaica, that the Cuban government would react by pulling everyone. No, and I think that's what basically happened. It was a poorly thought out plan to publicly state that you are offering them contracts, because you put the Cuban government in a precarious position. Also, the collaborators themselves, because they signed contracts with the Cuban government that they would come on these trips. Many of them have done tours of duty in other countries, and they're used to how things work. So it's understood that you don't just leave and sign contracts in these countries. You go back home after your tour of duty is finished, so as to ensure continuity.
And we have spoken about some of the laws in Cuba that would then penalize those who do not go back. So making this public would have been even more dangerous for those who wanted to stay. However, you raised questions in the Standing Finance Committee on March 5th. When did the opposition first become aware that the agreement was in jeopardy? And why is this the first time the public is hearing about this, since this negotiation has been going on now for 3 years?
Well, we were concerned when we realized that the numbers were dwindling. So the program was ending via attrition. So you're moving from about 350 doctors, nurses, biomedical engineers to 270 now. And the reason this was happening was that whenever the Cubans went back home, they would not have any replacements. So after a period of time, you would have some finishing their 2 years or whatever it is that tour is supposed to, how long that tour is supposed to last. And then you would have replacement doctors and nurses coming in. We noted that they were going back and there was nobody coming to replace them. So we were wondering if they were trying to end the program via attrition, but we knew that things were not all well in spite of the assurances that were made. But you don't want to publicly state your concerns just in case it jeopardizes the negotiations that are taking place, because at the end of the day, you can't play politics with something like this. If the government could have reached an agreement, this is something that the opposition would have welcomed, because it is all for the benefit of the Jamaican people. So even though we realize what was happening, it didn't suit the negotiation process for us to say anything. But this comes as no surprise, really.
Does it matter that this is a day after in Honduras the Cuban staff were forced to leave because of a similar termination there?
Well, that is really for the Minister of Foreign Affairs to answer, because I asked a pointed question if they had any pressure at all from Washington, and she flat out told me no. So, in the environment where we're seeing this happening in Honduras, in Guatemala, other countries, Bahamas terminated their agreement last year. And
they're now in the process of asking the U.S. government permission to then go back to Cuba. Right. So that is certainly something then that we have to watch, this changing geopolitical environment and what it means. Dr. Dawes, we're just going to quickly take a break and come back to you for a little bit, closing out this conversation for the benefit of those who are listening. Since you were unable to join us a little earlier, we're just begging you to stay with us for a second, then come back here inside Lead Story.
Hi, I'm Landy. Welcome to NLA Connect, the National Land Agency's customer engagement platform. NLA Connect is a simple, user-friendly platform designed to help you share your feedback, get support, and updates about land-related matters. Available 24/7, NLA Connect allows you to share suggestions, comments, and commendations, submit queries and report issues, attach files with your requests, track requests and get real-time status updates, connect with NLA client engagement officers, and provide feedback on the service received by the platform. We're making it easier for you to connect with us. You can access NLA Connect via our website, using the kiosk at any of our offices, or scanning the QR code displayed at our locations. Need any help along the way? Check out our FAQs section. It has all the answers you need in one location. NLA Connect, your voice, our priority.
We're continuing our conversation with opposition spokesman on health, Dr. Alfred Dawes, as we look at the fallout now, thanks to the government of Jamaica and the government of Cuba no longer now having in place a cooperation agreement. That means that 50 years of cooperation has now ended, and the Cuban government has indicated last Friday it will be bringing home its 277 workers here on the island. Dr. Dawes, the government has since then issued multiple communications. From Thursday, that initial statement. Cuba sent their response on Friday. Mr. Johnson Smith had that denial where you asked her if there had been pressure. But since then, we've had two subsequent updates from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. Has the messaging been consistent from your end, or has the government's position shifted?
It's frantic. They're trying to defend an indefensible position. And I believe that what the government should do is to just come straight out and tell the public what happened and justify the decision. It is quite fine if they said that they made this decision in the, looking at the big picture, and they think this is best for Jamaica given the geopolitical landscape and the fact that we have some great power rivalries where we have been caught up into that game. But to say that you discovered that you were paying the Cuban government instead of the Cuban doctors and nurses, that's just, that argument is just hollow. And the fact of the matter is that nobody believes it. You can't tell me after 10 years of paying someone, you're just going to discover that the contract breaks your local laws. And it happens during a time when other countries are going through similar negotiations with Cuba. So I think they just need to come clean and just let the people know, like, look, this is what happened. If you're afraid of a fallout, damaged relationships, just say it. But just get that past and let us focus on how we're going to fix the problem. Because this is a significant problem. We're talking about the collapse of the eye care program, a serious blow to the cancer care in Jamaica at St. Joseph's Hospital. And I'm being told that at Kingston Public Hospital, the dialysis unit is going to be severely impacted as well. And this is outside of the underserved rural communities that the Cubans would have been staffing the hospitals and clinics where Jamaicans don't necessarily want to go because of social reasons. So we are in a serious problem right now. And this the communication coming out of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, you just want to say stop. Just stop right now. Don't take us for idiots. Let us see if we can divert attention towards the Ministry of Health and see what can be done. And let's see what level of bipartisan support we can offer. Because right now it is the health of the Jamaican people that's at stake, not the reputation of the government in international circles or with the populace to see if they're still popular a few months after an election. We need to fix healthcare. What happened already, it done gone. Let us see how we're going to fix it. But stop.
It hasn't just happened, though, Dr. Dawes, and it's not just over the past 10 years. The United Nations had indicated that the Cuban medical missions were conditions of forced labor or forced labor-like conditions. The Organization of American States called it forced labor. The 2025 Trafficking in Persons report from the United States had said that this was forced labor, indicating to Jamaica as well that it needed to pay persons directly or it would potentially go on their Tier 2 watch list or Tier 3 listing. That would seriously have consequences for Jamaica. For all the concerns that we're raising about underserved rural communities and hospitals that might be impacted, there is also a concern that there are people who worked in Jamaica with their passports confiscated, with their wages not given to them, with restricted freedom of movement, and we are concerned not that these people have been trafficked, but that we are concerned that we don't have the continuation of our program. Jamaica would likely face consequences for trafficking these people. Is that part of the bigger concern as well, that these individuals, 277 still here, are people who might need then care, concern outside of what it is that they can provide to the Jamaican public?
Well, this is what the government needs to state clearly. Done this because of mounting international pressure on the structure of the Cuban program. But don't just say that you got up and discovered that this is. No, I'm not going to get into the scope of why this is happening, because as we alluded to earlier, these are changing times in the geopolitical landscape. And the fact of the matter is that we're a small island developing state. We have not gotten the economic independence that was the duty of the generation after independence. And as a result of that, we are vulnerable to fallout and diplomatic, consequences, for want of a better word, should we go along a particular route. And this is what the government should be saying, that we made the decision because of this, rather than to say that we suddenly discovered that this is the issue. Speaking with the Cubans themselves who are here and who have left, they may have a different version of events. And the fact that some of them go on these missions repeatedly to different countries, that in itself may show a different perspective.
And from Havana's perspective, the mission is voluntary, many Cuban doctors said when interviewed, indicating that it provides essential experience and income for their doctors. However small, they're still getting that experience when they get to go around the world. The funds retained by the state are used to subsidize universal health care back home in Cuba, and they provide free medical training. So this is effectively them being bonded, they say. And Cuba has then said that Jamaica is yielding to the highest bidder in Washington position rather than a genuine concern for labor rights. So that's some of that back and forth conversation that's going on there. But Dr. Dawes...
Well, just to jump in there, I have been a recruiter for the program. I've been to Cuba. I've sat across from Cubans who I remember one surgeon, his English was atrocious. And by any means, he would have failed because English is an important part. And he begged me. He said, please, I need this opportunity. I need this opportunity for my family. And it turns out that he came to work with me in Jamaica and we became very good friends, and he was an excellent doctor. But it never left me, him and others who they lined up. When they heard that we were coming to recruit, they came from all over Cuba. And there was disappointment when they weren't selected for one reason or another, whether it was that we didn't want that specialty on that trip, or their English wasn't good enough, or the experience. And some of these people were very experienced. They did tours of duty in Africa, in Brazil, Venezuela.
But then do you believe that the opposition is compromised if it is highlighted to be a forced labor program, that you would have been a recruiter for such a program?
Calling it a forced labor program, and I'm telling you that people were begging me to go on that program. And this was before politics. This was while I was in the public sector. So I'm speaking from my personal experience.
You're speaking then having spoken to these people, having then been part of them making the sort of determination and decision making
on the ground. It's a self-determination. Nobody was forcing them. They wanted to come.
Well, Dr. Dawes,
they were begging me to give them a chance to come, even though they didn't make the cut. And they came and they learned English.
And you said that we saw attrition.
I can't speak to forced labor if persons would have done tours elsewhere and they came back and they're trying to leave again to come.
Well, there's certainly something that, Dr. Dawes, it's certainly something that we'll be watching, not only from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade and the Ministry of Health and Wellness, giving us the feedback that you've asked for the questions that you and the opposition have, but also seeing what is then on the table for those underserved rural communities and those specialties that will now be losing. Dr. Alfred Dawes, thanks for joining us on Lead Story.
Thanks for that.
Okay, it's clearly a conversation that's going to be capturing national attention still. Everywhere in Jamaica isn't served the same, but our program has covered two stories. There's one thread running through those decisions made under pressure. Who pays for them? The budget is built on growth, projections that the Independent Fiscal Commission has questions, projections that if wrong, will fall hardest on the Jamaican who's already paying more at the pump and more for basic goods. And a 50-year health partnership ended without a publicly disclosed transition plan. 141 positions still unfilled. Those gaps will not be felt in boardrooms, they'll be felt in waiting rooms, in rural parishes, by patients who cannot go private. That's it for today's edition of Lead Story.